there's been some good work that's been done over the years that shows very dramatically that using Estrus synchronization with natural service is very doable. It's pretty easy to do. It has a great return on investment, and it's something not to be afraid of.
Today we've got Dr. John Hall for the podcast. So I'm excited to have you here, John. I'm excited about the topics that you sent. I think they're great topics. They fit well in my wheelhouse. That's something that I'm really enjoying. Will enjoy talking to you about. But before we get deep into some of this, some nutrition, reproduction, interaction, estrous synchronization stuff. Kind of give an overview of your career and how you got where you are today.
Thank you, Travis. It's really an honor to be here today. Just tell you a little bit. I grew up around dairy operations in Pennsylvania, but Dad was a ag economist, so didn't actually come from a ranch background. Went off to school at the Southeast at the University of Georgia, and then on to the University of Kentucky, and worked in extension as an area livestock agent with North Carolina State for a while. So along the way, I just really got interested in being an extension beef cattle specialist and helping the industry that way and helping producers in any way I could to increase their sustainability and profitability of their operations and kind of help the animal welfare that goes along with being a good beef producer. It's been a really fun ride. I've worked in a lot of different places, from the upper Midwest to the Southeast, and now I'm at the University of Idaho. So that's been an interesting avenue because it's given me experience in a variety of environments that beef production is in the U.S. And I've been able to take a little bit from each one of them and use it along the way. So, and just really enjoy working with the people in the industry. It's a great opportunity to have a career like this.
No, I think you touched on something that's very important, that sometimes we get in a vacuum, that beef production is so diverse in the environments, even in, let's say you're in Idaho, even in Idaho, the environments that your beef producers manage is very diverse. And so having that broad background of, from East Coast, Midwest to now Idaho, I think it brings a different perspective, and it makes you think a little different than, always being in a similar region, similar environment.
Always been kind of interesting. Sometimes you say, oh, that was better in this place than others, but there's always good things in every place that I've been, and great people. I mean, people in the beef industry are terrific.
Oh yeah, they are.
And so working with those people has been just a blessing.
It has. Plus, it's hard to say where you live in Salmon, Idaho is not a gorgeous place to live.
Very pretty place right on the edge of the Continental Divide, and so it's gorgeous most every day out of the year. Even when it's 20 below, it's going to be pretty.
All right, let's move into some of these topics. First up is talking about estrus synchronization with natural service.
Yeah, I think, I've worked a lot of years with estrus synchronization for AI and for fixed timed AI and those kinds of opportunities in the past. And we've struggled in the industry to make headway. Not everybody wants to do AI. And I think there's still a great opportunity for use of artificial insemination in the beef industry and in the commercial sector. I mean, I think there's a lot of lost opportunity there for us. But that being said, there is additional labor and other things that go along with having an AI program, and not everybody wants to do that. On the other hand, there's been some good work that's been done over the years that shows very dramatically that using estrus synchronization with natural service is very doable. It's pretty easy to do. It has a great return on investment, and it's something not to be afraid of. For our producers in Idaho, we use a lot of public lands. And so one of the things that's a challenge for our producers is that They want to try and get at least one. Let me go back and explain. In a lot of our public land areas, these are grazing associations. So there are multiple ranches grazing large areas of range, and everybody supplies bulls. And there may be within an association specific criteria for EPDs on bulls and quality of bulls, but still, people would rather that their cattle were bred by the bulls that they have purchased with the EPDs that they have selected. And so in Idaho, we calve a little earlier than you think would be sane to do, because we calve when it's fairly cold. But that part of that reason is so the calves are big enough when they go out to range, and so that the cows have at least one service by the bulls that the ranch owns before they go out and are out in common with other operators. So one of the tools that we have is estrus synchronization for natural service. And it can be as simple as having the bulls turned in for 5 days and then gathering everybody up, running them through a chute and giving them a single shot of prostaglandin, so luteolise or estromate, and then turning the cows and bulls back out. With that system, the bull to cow ratio doesn't really have to change too much. 1 to 25 still works pretty good in that system. Those cows come into heat the first 5 days. You'll get approximately 20% of the cows will be bred by the bulls just during natural service. And then after the shot of prostaglandin, those cows will be in heat over a 7 to 10 day period. So that allows those bulls to get a lot of cattle bred in a short amount of time. And work that was done in Nebraska showed pretty dramatically that they significantly increased the percentage of calves born in the first 21 days of the calving season with
Right.
that system. So a very simple system.
Yeah.
Other system that's very effective is to use a seeder for 7 days and put the seeder in. And when you take the seeder out a week later, either turn the bulls in right away or wait 1 day and turn the bulls in. And what has been shown with that kind of scenario is that it increases cyclicity in those cows that haven't started to cycle yet. And so by doing that, we see greater increases in the percentage of calves born in the first 30 days of the calving season. So shifting kind of from maybe a 40 or 50% of the calves born in the first 30 days to maybe 70 to 80% of the calves born in the first 30 days. And then higher overall pregnancy rates because we catch a few of those cows that we might otherwise miss because of
Yeah.
that. So pretty simple systems, but there are, you still have to gather cows and put them through a chute, and there's labor involved with that. But especially with these calf prices, the payback on having those calves born earlier in the calving season more than pays for the labor and the estrus synchronization products.
Yeah, when I talk to producers about it, is you think about if you had a 60-day calving season and you have calf born on day 1 and calf born on day 60, then that's roughly somewhere about 120 pound difference at weaning weight, and so that's a lot of money that you're giving up on the table by having cows that are calving later in that calving season. That if you can shift a higher percent earlier, that's a huge economic driver for that following year.
It is. It really is. It helps a lot. And with these calf prices staying high for the next couple of years, it makes good sense to try that.
Yeah. So why do you think a lot of producers still have not adopted a lot of reproductive technologies?
Well, I think like with a lot of things that we try and get producers to do or would like to encourage producers to do that involves a change in management or a change in labor, um, it it becomes a challenge. And I think what we've seen, across the U.S. is when we can get producers to try it and give them a little helping hand to experience it the first time to make sure that it's a positive experience. So working with their county extension educators or an extension specialist on it, then we see that adoption rate be pretty high. When
Mhm.
we just kind of spill the information out there and get that out to the producers, sometimes they're a little reluctant to take on that extra labor to adopt that procedure. And I
Right.
think getting them to try it one time is the key. Um, and I think sometimes they don't realize that return on investment as immediately. You know, when you when you buy the new bull and he's got higher EPDs for growth, and you see those heavier weaning weights pretty much right away, you realize that return on investment. Whereas with reproduction, you've got to wait another year, and sometimes you don't realize that, and you just think of the extra work that's involved before you see that return on investment. What would you think are some reasons that we see?
We're very traditional in our thought process is how we do it. It is additional labor, and it can be additional cost. The cedar is not necessarily a cheap thing.
Yeah, that's correct.
The 5-day bull turnout, then prostaglandin is um, is cheap. It's relatively cheap. It costs you that labor to go pull those cows back up and give them a shot. And so, there's some challenges with that is just managing that labor where cows are located. And like you say, Idaho is very unique in their grazing systems of having these community grazing systems that does create a big challenge in some of that. But a lot of times it's just where cows are located and having facilities to bring those cows back into to actually get, either pull a cedar, put it in a cedar, or give a shot. And so there's some logistics that you have to work through, but the return on investment is such a high return that it you would think you would be adopted at a much higher rate.
Yeah, you would think. And
We have seen some challenges with the 5-day bull turnout in drought years.
right.
And so, when I talk to producers about it, is if they really need to bump cows forward, I would not recommend that, and I would recommend a cedar.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, that one shot gives a slight bump, right? So it's not a big boost, but that cedar gives that big boost that you can really move cows.
Yeah.
Where that one shot, you're going to get some that are close to moving. You may not get the ones that are not.
If you're spread out a little bit, or you, like you say, nutrition has not been where you wanted it to be, you're going to
Yeah.
have less cows cycling. And for the single shot prostaglandin, cows have to be cycling. They have to have a
Yep.
CL in order to work with that
Correct.
program. Whereas with the cedar program, we can jumpstart some cows that aren't cycling and catch
Yeah.
cows up.
No, that's good.
In your part of the country, or when producers you deal with, we talk about a 60-day breeding season,
Yeah.
or maybe 90-day as a long one. But we
Mhm.
see some challenges
Yeah.
sometimes in that in our country. Pulling bulls is not exactly something that happens. And so,
Right. Right.
how do your producers deal with it? I know how some of ours do.
Yeah, it's a lot of them will have 45, 60-day breeding seasons, and they're pretty set on that shorter breeding season. I've become more and more of a fan of longer breeding seasons, and the reason behind it is I would rather sell a bred cull cow that was bred late than sell an open cull cow that I kept long. And so I think it provides the opportunity of increasing some value much quicker. We think about cull cows and keeping some cull cows, maybe turning a bull out and selling them for a different breeding season, but you keep them for 6, 8 more months
Right.
to do that,
Right.
right? And so I kind of like this idea of let's go with a 90, 100-day breeding seasons. And when my vet preg checks, if those late that miss the mark, they're all call cows who get sold for a different, calving season. And you get rid of them earlier. And so, and plus, in a lot of years, they have a lot more value because you're selling a bred female.
Yeah, and that's what we see producers doing here in this part of the world. Just because it is so difficult to pull bulls, but again, like you say, that value, and especially in the next few years, as we try to expand the cow herd again, the value of a bred cow is going to be extreme. Even if she's late bred, she'll fit into somebody's system.
Yeah, and so I would like to see a lot more producers because we've gone to really focusing on these shorter breeding seasons, and they're good because you think about the offspring, and we talked about that as having these tight calving windows for uniform calf crop, larger calves. But then we also leave some cows that maybe needed one more chance, 15 more days, and we could have went from 85, 90% preg rate to 90, 97. And not that you need to keep her,
Right. Right.
right? But you look for opportunities in the market of how can I increase value, and
Exactly.
reproductive technologies in general in our breeding season have opportunities that create a lot of value for the cow calf producer.
And I think having that flexibility and thinking outside the box a little bit on some of those things to capture that value, I think that's one of the challenges that we have to figure out is how do we best market everything that we produce, whether it be a cull open cow or a late bred cow. How do we manage that so that we maximize the income to the ranch?
Yeah, I mean, and that's with our margins getting smaller and smaller, we've got to look at ways to optimize and how can we increase that revenue without increasing our costs and keeping cows longer than we need to. And so I think this whole discussion on estrus synchronization with natural service, that should be a big part of a lot of these guys planning is how can I get cows cycling and getting bred earlier
Right.
that I can have a really tight window next year and have a uniform larger calf crop that I would if I had them strung out across a 60-day, 75 or
Right.
90-day breeding season. Yeah.
Yep.
So let's move over to talk about management of young cows. And so this is one of my favorite topics and something I really enjoy on the research end. And so I'm glad you had it in here.
I know you've done a lot of work in that area and good stuff. And let's just have a good discussion on it. I guess one of the things that we started talking about with our producers and also as far as research is concerned is how can we keep, we look at the data that comes across, whether it be out of producers' own records or some of the research records of what a high percentage of three-year-old and 4-year-old cows we lose in
Mhm.
the cow calf operation,
Yep.
and how we've lost a big investment in those cows,
Mhm.
and we've also losing the future genetics for our herd that way.
Right.
So what can we do to do that? And so come up with some strategies that maybe allow producers to maintain some more of those cows. And we've started doing things here at the research station that are probably not anything new or novel. Um, One of the things that we do in the fall is when we bring cows back from range, we'll sort the young cows and the thin cows into a separate group for winter
Hmm.
feeding so we can make up ground a little bit on some of those young cows. We still want them to work in the environment. We still expect them to
Yeah.
do their job. We don't want to pamper them too much, but we also realize that if they've got the genetics for growth and milk but they still are meeting the needs of matching the environment, they still might come in as a body condition score 4 or so
Right.
at weaning time, and we have a good opportunity to catch them up with feedstuffs that aren't really anything too much out of their normal,
Mhm.
what they normally see, just by giving them a chance. And sometimes it's just even giving them a chance for access to feed and not have to worry about the boss cow. So that's one angle that we've started at. The other thing that we've started on kind of a small research demonstration project here is as our
Yeah.
like everybody else, first calf heifers end up going back in with the cow herd most of the time, unless you've got a large number of first calf
Mhm.
heifers. And so, like I said, we deal with them at weaning time on that end by putting them in a separate winter feeding group. And then we've been also working this year with an experiment that we're taking half of those 3 and 4-year-old cows and actually putting them in with our first calf heifer pairs for feeding post calving.
Hmm.
So to give them a little more of a chance. And then in our research, we're looking at some maybe specific supplements, and have a graduate
Yeah.
student that's looking at some rumen protected fatty acid products. And um, I know we've also talked about just some easy supplementation of things like distiller's grains or corn gluten
Hmm.
feed as just a possible supplement that's highly digestible fiber, but
Right.
um, also is maybe more cost effective than some of our rumen protected products that are out there.
Right. Right. You touched on something that a lot of producers don't think of. That I know I've had a lot of guys run into some big jams is that they turn their young cows out with the mature cows, and a lot of times your preg rates will drop 5 percentage points
At least, yeah.
because yeah, because they cannot compete with those mature boss cows, and so when it comes to feed, if you think about if you're feeding 2 pounds of a supplement to those cows, you've got cows eating 5, 6, 7 pounds of it, and you've got those timid cows not eating a thing. And so you've got an animal that has much higher nutrient demands. She's trying to grow and she's not getting what she needs. And so that's a challenge for guys that don't have the ability to manage a different group.
Yeah, and it is hard, and managing that different group is not always easy. We don't always have the pastures or the facilities to do that, to separate them out. Um, so trying to come up with a way to do that is is a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Being cost effective of because you've got so much money in that female from heifer development, and it takes 4 or 5, depending on your cost of production. It could take up to 7, 8 years to pay off heifer development,
Right,
and
right.
so we don't want them to drop out early because someone has to pay for that, and so that becomes a big challenge for a lot of producers. Is that we're having these issues, especially in our environments, that we're very limited when they go out to range. There's not a lot of nutrients
That's
there.
right. And also maybe some other targeted reproductive strategies that we just got done talking about estrus synchronization for natural service. And maybe again we don't want to do that with all the cow herd because of the cost of a cedar or whatever. But maybe those 3 and 4 year old cows are the ones we need to go ahead and put a cedar in
Hmm.
to kind of help jumpstart those, because they're going to be the cows that are later in return to cyclicity after calving.
Hmm.
And
Right.
so maybe some targeted use of something, a tool like that might be advantageous. What kind of things have you been working on the young cow side? I know you've done a lot of work with protein supplements and some of those aspects.
Yeah. Still looking at how do we cost effectively increase rumen undergradable protein supply. And so, that's a big challenge for my growing aspect. And, unless you have cheap and distillers used to be a cheap source, and it's becoming not a byproduct anymore, it's becoming a product. And so its cost has really come up. And so, so bypass protein is a challenge of being cost effective, and it's one of our biggest needs in a lot of our systems. Is we've got enough rumen degradable protein in our forages,
Right.
but we don't have enough rumen undegradable to meet some of those needs of lactation and growth. And so how do we find ways to increase that supply and do it very cost effectively? And so some of the other stuff we're working on is how do you supplement cows out on range that you may not be seeing but once a week? Yeah,
Exactly.
and so we don't have a lot of good options for that, especially if we're short on protein and energy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. With energy in there, it becomes more problematic.
It does, and so delivery styles and how do we package a supplement that can be fed less frequently that still meet all those needs and be very cost effective to do it.
Besides distiller's grains, what other sources of rumen undegradable protein or have you guys been trying to use in the past?
Historically, we've always used animal byproducts, so feather meal, fish meal, porcine blood meal, and you can still utilize those. And there are tremendous um, uh, bypass protein sources from just a quality aspect. But there's this negative perception on them,
Yeah.
and so they're harder to get. get. A lot of mills will not do not want them in their mills, and so it's hard to get supplements to add, a supplement package, especially a pellet or a cube with those in there because they don't want to deal with it.
Right. Right.
And so that's a challenge. Corn gluten mill is very expensive, but it also is a high bypass protein source. And so we don't have very good options outside of distillers.
Yeah.
Corn gluten mill. You can get some treated soybean mill that's higher in rumen undegradable protein, but it gets very expensive as well. And so that's the challenge going forward is we need some byproducts that have that ability of being bypass protein that can be very cost effective.
Yeah.
And we're very limited in that.
Yeah. That's going to be a hard thing to come up with. And for us in our area, people forget that, think of Idaho and think of range and think of the mountains and think of beef cows, but we're number three in dairy. And
Hmm.
so the dairy industry really boosts the cost of a lot of our products, our feedstuffs up here because of that competition. And, another obviously for the cow calf operator in other areas of the country, it's the feeding sector is creating
Hmm.
that challenge. And so um, I think it's important that producers know what's available in their area and what
Yeah,
opportunities there are. And again, think outside the box a little bit about how to handle some of those products. And
right.
then be careful because sometimes products are available that seem like they're really cheap, but because they're wet distillers grains instead of dried distillers grains, the cost of transportation really is too high to warrant bringing those feedstuffs in. And so to look at those feedstuffs on a cost per
Right.
pound of dry matter or pound of TDN or pound of protein basis rather than just a ton as fed is important.
Yeah, with any wet feed like that, transportation is a big cost, but also your ability to feed it and feed it very quickly and not let it sit
Before it spoils. Yeah.
before it spoils. And so that's a challenge for cow calf producers and feeding a wet distillers is that you've got to go through it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And not everybody's set up to handle some of those products. We had years ago, we had a drought in the southeast and had grain producers that were offering silage, chopped corn by the ton, brought to the ranch at a very, very economical rate. And
Hmm.
just the problem was, even though people could make a bunker silo on their ranch, they couldn't utilize that feed stuff because they didn't have a really good way to handle it in those small herds in the southeast. They weren't set up equipment wise to handle that feed stuff.
Yeah, it's always a challenge of doing rations with producers that you're very limited in their ability to do certain things and what they have available, and it's tough sometimes to make it work of meeting their goals with what they have the ability to do.
Yeah.
It's where you're jealous of dairies and feedlots is they have a lot more flexibility, a lot more ability to feed some of these commodities than cow calf producer that is very limited on their ability to feed it.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I want to go back and touch on one thing. I think it's really important that I really like doing is you said using cedars with 3 and 4 year old cows,
Yeah.
and I think we'll touch on this a little bit because if it's me, that's the animal I'm targeting to
Right.
use a cedar
Right.
on. And so I think it has the highest return on investment when you think about the cost of the cedar, whether or not you use AI or not. Um, I, I- I think that's really important. If you want to target an animal, that's the animal to target, right?
Definitely. Those are the ones that we're going to get the most value out of that cedar in those younger cows that are anestrus. And we're going to
Yeah.
bring them online and get them to be caught up with everybody else.
No, I think that's really important is how can we be very strategic with the technologies that we have and it's not one of those situations that it fits everyone's management, but there's so many great technologies that we have not adopted very well, and
Yeah.
that's one of them. And so I've always used 20% of the herds in the United States use estrus
Yeah.
or reproductive technologies.
Yeah. Somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah.
And that's just so underutilized. And, if it, you don't have to use it on the whole herd,
Right.
but,
Target use of things. Yeah.
target use of things is important. And I think you would get a big boost in return by targeting those young cows with a cedar.
Sure.
It's time for our famous three.
Is stress affecting your bottom line? Even routine handling, inclement weather, weaning, and dietary changes can significantly lower the rumen pH, causing cortisol levels to spike. Cortisol not only compromises the immune system, but also suppresses normal appetite and feed consumption. The solution? Cattle Active. Increase production and reduce the impacts of stress on your cattle for cents a day. Cattle Active restores the balance naturally. Want to learn more how a feeding program including Cattle Active can improve both profits and herd health? Visit us today at proearthanimalhealth.com. Be proactive with Cattle Active.
All right, John. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. I've got a few other questions to wrap us up. And so, what is your favorite beef-related resource or book it's your go-to resource that you go to?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. On a resource, I guess it depends on a lot of different things of what looking for. On the nutrition side, it would certainly be the nutrient requirements of beef cattle program. Works very well for a lot of things. It's getting a little age on it, but it's still a real good program. Um, when we had it up to date and going good for producers, the old yellow book that we had in the Western states, which was the
Mm-hmm.
cow-calf management handbook library uh, through the multi-state group, was always a good one. So I
No,
guess those are kind of the ones that just pop into my head in terms of resources.
yeah, no, those are great. So, any favorite book that you're reading right now? Any book recommendations that the audience may enjoy?
I guess there's two books that I have enjoyed extremely well that are related. First one's related to history, which I'm always interested in, and being in the part of the
Mm-hmm.
world living in, was Undaunted Courage, which was about the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Mm-hmm.
That was an excellent book. And then another book that's more ag related, that again is more regional in nature, but is called Cattle in the Cold Desert, and talks about when cattle were first brought into the Great Basin area of the U.S. and kind of the changes and challenges, the changes in grazing management and cattle management that occurred over the years when they realized maybe keeping cattle out
Yeah,
365 days of the year wasn't going to exactly work in this part of the world like maybe it had in Texas and some other parts of the country.
no, I'll have to look those up. I know the Sacagawea. What is that museum you have there? Is a really interesting.
Yeah, we have the Sacagawea Center, which is right here in Salmon. Of course, Lemhi County, which is where Salmon is located, was the county in which Sacagawea was born.
A lot of ties to Lewis and Clark there. Yeah.
A lot of ties to Lewis and Clark. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what sets a successful beef professional apart from those that are not?
I think some of the things that set the beef professional apart from others that are not is, I think, first, that person has a good sound knowledge and background and is willing to continue to learn. And that's
Mm,
including learning from anyone in the industry, regardless of where they are in the industry, whether
right.
they're new or established, or they're producer, or they're allied industry, or what have you. There's always something you can learn from someone in this industry. And I think being open and caring. I think those of us that deeply care about the industry and the people that are involved in it succeed. We're not looking at it as a job or service. For me, as an extension professional, I service people that have dedicated their lives and their families' livelihoods and the future of their family to producing protein for people of the world. And I need to remember and care about those people. And I think when you do, and you care about the animals that we're working with, that helps make you successful.
Well, I think that's great points. That being an extension, we're all about service and helping our producers, and even just in academia in general, is we really want to help those we were working for, that paying our paychecks.
Exactly.
Making sure they're successful and they're meeting their goals. Those are great points. So again, thanks, John, for coming on the podcast. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Travis. Thanks for having me.